Let's see if we can figure out what 2 divided by 0.1 or 1/10 is. Pause this video and see if you can figure that out. All right, now let's work through it together. And there's a couple of ways that we can approach it. One way is to think about everything in terms of tenths. So 2 wholes is how many tenths? Well, a whole is equal to 10 tenths, so 2 wholes is equal to 20 tenths. So I could rewrite the 2 as 20 tenths. And so that's going to be 20 tenths divided by, and instead of writing it this way, I could, instead of just writing it as 0.1, we know this is the same thing as 1/10. So divided by 1/10. And so if I have 20 of something, and if I divide it into groups of 1 of that something, how many groups am I going to have? Well, I'm going to have 20 equal groups of 1. So 20 tenths divided by 1/10 is equal to 20. Another way that you could approach that is you could rewrite the 0.1, the 1/10, as a fraction. We could rewrite this as 2 divided by, instead of writing 1/10 like this, I could write it as a fraction, divided by 1/10. Well, we know that dividing by a tenth is the same thing as multiplying by 10. So this is going to be equal to 2 times 10. And that gets us to the same place that we had before. What is 2 times 10? Well, that is going to be equal to 20. And that's good that we got to the same answer. Otherwise, these would not be equivalent methods. Let's do another example. So let's say we wanted to figure out what 6 divided by 1/10 is. Pause this video and see if you can figure that out. All right. Well, you could do the same idea. 6 wholes is equal to how many tenths? It's equal to 60 tenths. So I'll rewrite this as 60 tenths divided by 1/10 is equal to how many, is equal to what? Well, if I have 60 of something, and if I divide it into groups of 1 of that something, I'm going to have 60 equal groups of 1. So this is going to be equal to 60. So you might see a pattern. When we divided by a tenth, we end up multiplying by 10. When we divide by a tenth, we are multiplying by 10. And you could do the same thing as we saw up here. You could say 6 divided by 1/10 is the same thing as 6 divided by 1/10 written as a fraction, which is going to be equal to 6 times, you could say 6 times 10 or 6 times 10 over 1, either way, 6 times 10 over 1, or which is the same thing as 10, which is once again going to be equal to 60. So I think you see the general pattern. Divide by a tenth, same thing as multiplying by 10. Now what about if we dealt with hundredths? So let's say we want to figure out what 7 divided by 1/100th is. What would this be? Pause this video and try to figure it out. All right, well, we can do the same drill. So 7 wholes, 1 whole is equal to 100 hundredths. So 7 wholes is equal to 700 hundredths. So this is equal to, I'll write it like this, 700 hundredths divided by 1/100th. 1/100th. If I have 700 of something, and if I'm dividing it into equal groups of 1 of that something, I'm going to have 700 equal groups. So this is going to be equal to 700. So you divide by 100th is the same thing as multiplying by 100. Now you could also rewrite this as a fraction if you like, so that some of the principles we saw up here still apply. So we could rewrite this as 7 divided by 1/100th. And so this is going to be the same thing as 7 times 100 over 1, or 7 times 100. 7 times 100, which once again will get you to 700. So I think you see a pattern. Divide by a tenth, same thing as multiplying by 10. Divide by 100th, same thing as multiplying by 100.